Hello.
It was late enough that the street outside had gone still, the last of the evening traffic long faded. I sat at the small table by the window, a book open in front of me, though I had been reading the same paragraph for the last 10 minutes without really noticing. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet, along with the occasional creak from the old floorboards. I had decided to call it a night soon when a knock sounded at the door. 2 quick taps, then a pause, then one more. I set the book down and crossed the room. When I opened the door, she was there, my neighbor from across the hall. She stood just close enough that the hallway light framed her in a pale glow, her hair a little tousled, a faint color in her cheeks as if she had walked quickly. There was no coat, only a light sweater, and she held her bag in both hands. "They can't find out I'm here," she whispered, her voice low enough that it almost disappeared between us. The words puzzled me. I was about to ask who she meant, but she glanced over her shoulder toward the stairwell, and whatever answer I had been forming stayed behind my teeth. "Come in," I said, stepping back to make room. She slipped inside with a certain quickness, not hurried exactly, but with purpose. I closed the door and turned the lock without really thinking about it. She stood near the middle of the room, her gaze drifting over the shelves, the framed photographs, the half-finished cup of tea on the table. Her shoulders eased slightly as if the walls here offered her something she had been missing in the hall. I gestured toward the couch. "Sit. You want something to drink? Tea? Coffee? Or I might still have a bottle of wine in the cupboard." Her eyes shifted to mine, and for the first time since she arrived, there was a faint smile. "Tea, if you have it." I filled the kettle and set it on the stove. The click of the burner was louder than usual in the quiet. She settled on the couch, her bag resting against her legs, fingers playing lightly with the strap. The light from the small lamp near the corner touched her face in a way that made it look softer, warmer than I was used to seeing when we passed each other in the hall. "You surprised me," I said as I reached for 2 mugs. "That's the idea," she replied, her tone gentle but with something underneath it, something I couldn't place. I brought the tea over and set it on the low table in front of her. She wrapped her hands around the cup almost immediately, like she needed the warmth. I took the chair opposite, leaving the couch to her. "Long day?" I asked. "You could say that." She glanced toward the window, where the curtain swayed faintly from a draft. "I just wanted to be somewhere else for a while, somewhere no one would expect me to be." I nodded slowly. "And here you are." "And here I am," she echoed, though there was no trace of regret in her voice. For a few minutes we just drank our tea in silence, the sound of it being sipped, the distant hum from the hallway radiator, the faint rush of air from outside. They all wove together into something calmer than the evening had been before she knocked. I could feel the question pressing against the back of my mind, why she didn't want anyone to know she was here, but I left it alone. She leaned back into the couch, crossing one leg over the other. "I like your place," she said, her eyes moving slowly over the books stacked near the window, the small potted plant on the shelf. "It's nothing special," I said. "It feels private," she replied, "like the kind of space where you can breathe." I didn't know if that was meant as a compliment or a confession, but I accepted it with a quiet nod. The tea was still hot in my hands, the steam curling upward in slow, lazy ribbons. She took another sip, then met my eyes. "Thanks for letting me in. You didn't really give me a chance to say no," I said lightly. Her smile returned, just a little stronger this time. "I was hoping you wouldn't." The kettle had gone still long ago, and the lamp cast a warm halo over the corner where she sat. Something about the moment felt suspended, as if the usual rules of neighbors and small talk had been left in the hall along with the rest of the building. And even though I still didn't understand what exactly she meant by that first whispered sentence, I didn't feel the need to press for an answer. Not yet. She set the mug back on the table, the faint clink of ceramic sounding louder than it should have. "It's quiet here," she said, her gaze flicking briefly toward the window before returning to me. "Quieter than my place, anyway." I smiled a little. "Thin walls over there?" "Thin walls, thin patience," she replied, her tone wry. "Sometimes it feels like there's always someone knocking, calling, wanting something. I just needed a break from that." I leaned back in the chair, cradling my own cup. "Well, you found the quietest spot on the floor." She let out a small laugh, soft and quick, as if she didn't want it to carry too far. "I didn't want anyone to see me coming in here. Not because it's wrong, just because people talk." I nodded, understanding more than I admitted out loud. The building had its own ecosystem of gossip. Small glances in the elevator, whispers in the mailroom. It didn't take much to start a story, and even less to keep it alive. "Do you mind if I look around?" she asked suddenly, setting her tea aside. "Go ahead," I said, watching as she rose from the couch. She moved slowly, her eyes tracing the shelves of books, the framed photographs, the small stack of papers on the side table. She didn't touch anything, just let her gaze linger here and there. When she reached the window, she pulled the curtain aside an inch, peering down to the street. The faint glow of the lamplight outside brushed against her face. "No one," she murmured, more to herself than to me, before letting the curtain fall back into place. She returned to the couch and curled one leg under herself. "I like it here," she said again, but this time it sounded more like she meant with you than in the apartment. I poured a little more hot water into her cup, and she accepted it with a nod. For a while, we talked about harmless things, the slow elevator, the way the radiator pipes made strange noises in the winter, the corner shop that had started selling fresh bread on Thursdays. There was a rhythm to it, the kind of conversation that didn't need to prove anything. After a pause, she tilted her head slightly. "You live alone?" "Yes," I said. "You?" She gave a small shrug. "Depends on the week. Sometimes it feels like I do, sometimes it feels like I don't." It was the kind of answer that invited more questions, but her eyes said not to ask just yet. I took another sip of tea instead. A moment later, her gaze drifted toward the short bookcase near the corner. "Those old ones," she said, pointing. "The ones with the faded covers. Where did you get them?" "From a market a few years back," I said. "I keep meaning to read them, but I like the way they look there." She smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's enough, just to have them near." The rain had started again outside, light at first, then steadier, a soft percussion against the window pane. She seemed to settle more deeply into the couch, her shoulders dropping, the tension in her face smoothing. I realized she hadn't looked at her phone once since arriving. "I hope I'm not keeping you from anything," she said, though her tone made it sound like she hoped the answer was no. "Not at all," I said. "It's nice having company." That earned me another quick smile, one she didn't try to hide. We sat like that for a while, her on the couch, me in the chair, the lamp casting a warm light over the room. The quiet between our words didn't feel empty. Felt like the kind you could rest inside. Eventually, she reached for her bag, unzipping it just enough to pull out a folded piece of paper. She looked at it briefly, then slid it back inside without comment. I caught the movement, but I didn't ask. She glanced toward the clock on the wall. "I should go soon," she said, though she made no move to stand. "Or," I said, "you could wait until the rain eases up." She looked toward the window as if weighing the idea. "That might be nice," she admitted. So she stayed, and the rain kept tapping against the glass, and I thought, without saying it, that I wouldn't mind if she found more reasons to be here. The rain softened after a while, shifting from its steady rhythm to an occasional patter, but she didn't mention leaving again. She sat back against the couch cushion, her mug resting loosely between her hands, and let her gaze wander over the room as if memorizing it. I wasn't sure if she was looking at the space or the fact that she was in it. "You always keep it this neat?" she asked suddenly, her tone somewhere between teasing and curious. "Mostly," I said, "though I did just move a pile of papers off the table before you came in." Her lips curved slightly. "For my benefit? Maybe," I admitted. "Or maybe I just didn't want you to think I live in chaos." She set the mug down on the table, leaning forward slightly. "And do you?" I shook my head. "Not the kind you can see." Her expression held for a moment, then softened into something warmer. "Fair enough." A small draft moved through the room, carrying with it the faint scent of rain from the window. She noticed it too, glancing toward the glass. "It's strange, isn't it? How a place can feel different at night, even when nothing's changed." I nodded. "Sometimes better, sometimes worse." She turned back to me, studying my face as if weighing which one applied tonight. Whatever she decided, it made her relax a little more. "Better," she said finally. For a while, the only sound was the occasional drip from the eaves outside. Then she reached into her bag again, not for the folded paper this time, but for a small key. She turned it between her fingers, the metal catching the lamplight. "Ever keep something locked up?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "A few things." She looked at the key, then back at me. "It's funny. Sometimes you lock something away to protect it, and other times to protect yourself from it." I waited for her to go on, but she only slipped the key back into her bag and changed the subject. "You read a lot?" I gestured toward the shelves. "Enough. It's easier than television most nights." She smiled faintly. "I like that, a person who still reads." Our conversation drifted again, touching on small, almost inconsequential topics. Food we missed from childhood, the best time of year in the city, whether the building's ancient elevator would survive another winter. I found myself leaning forward without realizing it, drawn in by the rhythm of her voice, the way her words seemed chosen not for their content but for the space they created between us. At one point, she glanced toward the door. "Do you ever worry about people just showing up?" "Not until tonight," I said with a faint smile. Her eyes held mine for a beat, then she shook her head, almost to herself. "I guess I just wanted to see if it would feel different here." "Does it?" "Yes," she said simply, and that was the end of it. The rain had nearly stopped now, leaving the air heavier but calmer. She reached for her tea again, though it had cooled, and took a small sip anyway. "You make good tea," she said, as if that was the most important observation of the night. "It's just tea," I said. "It's not just tea," she countered softly, and for a moment there was something in her eyes that made me forget the rest of the room. A car passed outside, its headlights sweeping briefly across the curtain. She glanced toward it, then back at me. "I'm not in a hurry," she said. I nodded. "Good." The clock ticked softly in the background, marking time that didn't seem to matter here. She leaned back again, her posture easy now, one leg curled beneath her, and I realized she looked entirely at home despite her whispered words at the door. "They can't find out I'm here," she had said. But right now, it felt less like a warning and more like a small, shared secret, one that lived only inside these walls. She glanced around the room again, her eyes catching on the small wooden shelf near the corner. One of the brackets had loosened a little, the edge tilting down just enough to be noticeable if you were looking for it. "Do you mind if I point something out?" she said, her tone cautious, almost playful. "Go ahead," I replied. "That shelf," she said, nodding toward it. "It looks like it's about to give up." I stood and walked over, pressing lightly on the edge. "It's been like that for a while. I keep meaning to fix it, but now you have someone to hand you the screws," she said, already setting her tea down and rising from the couch. I smiled. "I guess I do." I fetched a small toolkit from the cabinet while she moved closer to the shelf. She stood beside me, close enough that I could catch the faint scent of her perfume, something warm and subtle. I handed her a screwdriver, and she held it like it was a pen, turning it in her fingers. "I'm not exactly handy," she admitted, "but I can hold things still." "That's usually the harder part," I said. We worked in a quiet rhythm, me adjusting the bracket, her keeping the shelf steady. Occasionally our hands brushed when she passed me a screw or when I shifted position. Each time, there was a slight pause, not awkward, just noticed. When the last screw was in place, I leaned back to check our work. "That should hold." She stepped back too, looking at the shelf with an oddly satisfied expression. "It's silly, but it feels nice to fix something." "It's not silly," I said. "Most things stay broken longer than they should." Her eyes lingered on mine for a moment before she glanced away, returning to the couch. I put the tools back, and when I joined her, she was smiling faintly. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For letting me do that," she replied. "It's been a while since I felt useful for something small." I shook my head. "You don't need to prove you're useful." "I know," she said softly, "but it's still nice." The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the room filled with a softer quiet. She reached for her tea again, swirling it slightly in the mug before taking a sip. "You ever notice," she said, "how sometimes helping someone makes you feel better than being helped?" "I think that's why people keep doing it," I said. She nodded slowly, as if filing that away. After a while, she leaned back into the couch, stretching her legs out just enough to brush against mine. It felt accidental, but she didn't move them away, and I didn't shift either. The lamp cast a warm pool of light around us, the rest of the room fading into softer shadows. "I should probably go," she said, though her tone didn't match the words. "You could," I replied, "or you could stay a bit longer." She looked at me for a moment, then set her mug down. "Maybe just a little longer." The air between us felt different now. Not heavy, but warmer, more certain. I realized that whatever reason had brought her here tonight, it wasn't just about avoiding someone else. It was about finding a space that felt better than where she'd been. When she finally glanced toward the clock, the hour was later than I'd expected. She stood, smoothing her sweater, and picked up her bag. "Thank you for the tea," she said, "and for letting me be here." "You're welcome any time," I told her. At the door, she paused and looked back. "Remember," she said with a small smile, "they can't find out I'm here." Then she slipped into the hallway, leaving the faint trace of her perfume and the quiet impression that tonight had shifted something, though I couldn't yet say what. She came back 2 nights later, the knock the same as before, 2 quick taps, a pause, then one more. I opened the door, and there she was, this time with a faint smile already in place, as if she knew I'd been half expecting her. "I hope it's not too late," she said, stepping inside without waiting for me to answer. "It's never too late for tea," I replied, closing the door behind her. She laughed quietly, setting her bag down near the couch. "You're predictable. And you're back," I said. Her eyes softened. "I told you, it's quieter here." I filled the kettle while she settled into the same corner of the couch she'd claimed last time. This time she seemed more at ease, leaning into the cushion, legs tucked beneath her. I brought over 2 mugs and set one in front of her. "Rain again?" I asked, noticing the faint damp on her sleeves. "Just a light drizzle," she said. "Enough to make the street smell different." We talked for a while about small things, the new plants in the lobby, the neighbor downstairs who'd started playing music a little too late at night, the strange rattle in the building's pipes. There was an ease to it now, like we'd skipped the cautious stage and moved into something quieter, more familiar. At one point, she leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "Do you ever think about what people imagine when they see us talking in the hall?" I shrugged. "Probably something more interesting than the truth." "And what is the truth?" she asked, her gaze steady. "That you like my tea," I said. Her smile lingered, but she didn't argue. Instead, she reached for her mug, holding it between her hands as if she needed the warmth. The evening drifted on. Outside, the drizzle continued, tapping lightly at the window. Inside, the air was still, except for the soft sound of the clock and the occasional clink of ceramic on wood. She asked me about the books I was reading, about the small framed photo on the shelf, about the plant by the window. Nothing felt forced. When I glanced at the time, it was already later than I'd thought. "Do you want me to walk you back?" I asked. She hesitated, looking toward the door, then back at me. "I could stay a little longer." "It's up to you," I said. She shifted slightly, curling into the couch again. "It's warmer here." That was all the answer I needed. I topped up her tea, and we let the conversation slow until it was more pauses than words. The space between us felt different now. Not empty, but filled with the kind of quiet that doesn't need explaining. Eventually, she leaned her head back, eyes half closed. "I might fall asleep here," she murmured. "You could," I said. "I wouldn't mind." Her lips curved faintly, but she didn't open her eyes. Dangerous offer. We sat like that for a while, until the clock's hands had crept even further into the night. When she finally stirred, she looked almost reluctant to move. She stood, smoothing her hair, and picked up her bag. "Thank you," she said softly. "For the tea?" I asked. "For letting me stay," she replied. At the door, she paused, that same small smile returning. "You know, they still can't find out I'm here." And then she was gone again, leaving behind the warmth in the room and the sense that each time she came, it was for longer than the last. She came again the following week, though this time it wasn't evening, it was just after midday. The light through the window was pale, the kind that softens everything it touches. I was at the table, sorting through a small stack of letters, when the familiar knock came. 2 taps, a pause, then one more. When I opened the door, she was smiling as if we'd agreed on this without ever saying so. "I was nearby," she said, stepping inside. You always say that, I replied, closing the door behind her. Because it's always true, she said, setting her bag down. I put the kettle on, the now familiar start to our routine. She moved around the room as if she'd been here 100 times, touching the back of the chair, glancing at the shelf we'd fixed, pausing by the plant near the window. It's still alive, she said, nodding toward it. Your encouragement probably helped, I said. She turned back to me, her smile softening. Maybe I should stop by more often, just to check. We sat with our tea, talking in the easy way we had settled into. She told me about a book she'd started reading, about the neighbor who'd asked her for a recipe, about how she sometimes heard the sound of my radio through the wall late at night. It's not loud, she said. It's comforting. I told her about the letter I'd received from an old friend, about the odd delivery that had been left at my door by mistake, about the way the building seemed to sigh when the wind picked up. At one point, she looked at me over the rim of her cup. Do you ever feel like some places hold secrets better than others? I thought for a moment. Maybe. Or maybe some people just know how to keep them. Her gaze lingered, then drifted away. I like to think this is one of those places. The afternoon light shifted as the hours passed, turning warmer, softer. She stayed without looking at the clock, and I didn't mention the time. There was no reason to. The kettle had been refilled twice, and the conversation had moved from books to memories to small silences that felt as much a part of the day as anything else. Eventually, she stood, moving slowly, as if testing whether I would say something to make her stay. I should go before it gets dark, she said. Or you could wait until it does, I suggested. She tilted her head, considering. And then what? Another cup of tea. Maybe, I said, or maybe nothing. Just here. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she picked up her bag and walked to the door. Her hand rested on the knob, but she turned back to me. They can't find out I'm here, she said again. But this time the words were almost a whisper of a smile, not a warning. I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint curve at the corner of her mouth. Then we won't tell them. She gave the smallest nod, opened the door and slipped into the hall. I watched the space she'd left behind for a while before closing it. The room was quiet again, but it didn't feel the same as before she'd arrived. It felt like it was holding something now. A trace of her voice, the warmth of the tea, the way the light had shifted around her. And I had the certain feeling that the next knock would come sooner than I expected.
Bye-bye.